Hello everybody, thank you for joining us today at Abry Homes Staircasing webinar. My name is Nikki Weaver, I'm Post Sales Manager here at Abry and I will be your host for today's event. So today's event, we want to talk to you about everything about staircasing. We will talk to you about what staircasing is and also what the process will be to complete a staircasing transaction. I am joined today by a panel of experts that will talk to you a bit of an element about, from their perspective, what the staircasing involves. Okay, so I am going to introduce you to each one of our panel experts. Firstly, then, let's go over to Dan.
Thanks, Nikki. So, yep, my name's Dan Maskell. I'm a post-sales officer with Abry. So I'm responsible, along with my colleagues in my team, of processing your staircasing applications from start to finish. And we'll obviously go on to a bit more of that later in the session, but that's me. Happy to pass back to Nikki.
Thank you, Dan. And next up, we have Elliot.
Good afternoon. So my name's Elliot Murtagh. Good afternoon. My name's Elliot Murtagh and I'm a broker from the Mortgage Hut. And my role is basically to take you through the affordability and place the mortgage, and we'll manage the process all the way through until you get the staircasing share you're looking for. And that's what we do. Back to Nikki.
Thank you, Elliot. And next up, we have Matthew.
Hello, so I'm Matthew. I'm from Capsit Solicitors, and essentially what we do is we deal with the whole legal side of the whole process. So all of the actual documents that we registered to ensure that the staircasing has actually gone through and is on the record, so that everybody who comes in contact with the property in the future knows what's happened. And that's essentially it for us. So back to you, Nikki.
Thank you, Matthew. Thank you, guys. So just to give you a bit of context, okay, and a bit of information about what is staircasing. So staircasing is talking to you, it is about purchasing an additional share in the property. So you've purchased a share as a shared owner, and then things may change in the future and you wish to purchase more shares. And that is just buying chunks as you wish to go. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand you over to Dan at Abry, who will talk to you more about the process and what happens when you contact us to staircase. Dan.
Thanks, Nick. So, yeah, as I mentioned earlier, we process the transactions from Abry's side, Abry's point of view, and we'll be your main point of contact when you want to do a staircasing transaction. So once we've got your application form in, I suppose firstly, before we go there, if you are interested in staircasing, contact us. Our customer service team can send you out a guide and an application form, which will summarise all of the process. But when you want to start the process, get in touch with us, send us your application form. We'll go through some ID checks with you as well that we'll save to the file. And the most important thing is the valuation report. So send us that. The valuation reports are usually valid for a period of 3 months. So it's really key to make sure that you order your RICS valuation reports once you are ready to start the process, because the worst thing you want to do is order it, pay for it, kind of have 2 months elapse and then send it in. It kind of rushes the transaction and you may need to get an extension, which may cost you a bit more money. So the real thing is just to get everything ready when you're ready to go. Once we've got your file open, we'll download a copy of your lease from the land registry. We'll confirm the shares that you want to buy, that you've told us you want to buy. We'll confirm in writing to you how much those shares are going to cost. We'll put that all in a letter for you, all official. And then once you've responded and say, yep, you want to go ahead, we will then get solicitors instructed. We will instruct our solicitors to act on our side. Your solicitors will act on your side, and the 2 solicitors will process the transaction together. Like I said, we'll be the main point of contact. We will manage that transaction through to completion for you. So there are documents that need to be signed along the way. The solicitors will agree on the documents. Once they're all agreed, you will get a copy. We will also get a copy on our side, and these documents will be countersigned. Once the documents are countersigned, the conveyancing side of the staircasing is all completed. That's when it will all be a completion date will all be agreed to, and we can get that all finalised for you. So it sounds nice and simple, but that's what we're here for. Is here to help you process that through. So that's it in a nutshell from our side. But there obviously are other bits along this process which I suppose both Elliot and Matthew know about from their sides respectively. So that's it from me, Nick.
Thank you, Dan. That was really useful. Just to obviously let you know as well, we do have a question and answer session. So just to remind you all to pop your questions into the Q&A section, and then we will go through and answer those just after everyone has had a chance to talk to you about their processes. Okay, so Elliot, did you want to start from the mortgage advisor perspective?
Yeah, thanks then, Nikki. So from my side, one of the things I would do, just to sort of follow on from what Dan was saying and about paying for the RICS survey, is my sort of phrase is get your ducks in order. Is I would speak to you first, encourage you to get your credit checks done, get some basic valuations and stagings done, so we can sort of try and work out how much your potential share would cost, and if you can actually do it. So it's all about affordability. And what I'm trying to do is also get an agreement of principle carried out, so before you start the process that you've got the potential of the backing of a lender behind you. Once you decide to proceed and you've got the valuation carried out and all the figures are stacking up, it's just then from my perspective just like a normal mortgage process. It's all about getting the documentation in, getting the lender sourcing. And the lender, whoever we use, will also have another valuation carried out as well. And then it's just waiting for the case to go to offer. And then it's just a normal buying process from there, effectively. And that's what we would do. Back to Nikki.
Thank you, Elliot. Okay, and on to Matthew then from the legal perspective.
So Daniel covered it quite nicely, really. In a nutshell, what we do is essentially the same as what Daniel described. So we'll be getting our instruction directly from ABRI. At that point, we will then open our files and get all of the documentation relating to the property from Land Registry. So this will be the freehold titles and your leasehold title. On instruction, we'll be provided the lease, so there's no doubling of the costs or anything like that. At this point, we will then produce the memorandum of staircasing just to confirm the percentages that are being purchased, whether this takes you to 100% or any amount below that. All of that will be set out on the memorandum of staircasing. What we'll also have to do is check the lease just to make sure and see essentially whether the freehold of the property can in fact be transferred upon 100% staircasing. If this is the case, we'll then have to create the transfer documents. These will then all get sent over to your solicitors for approval. And then once they're approved, we'll get them executed by ABRI as well. And at that point, once we're holding everything, we'll be ready to complete. The only real thing that could hold up the whole process is whether there's a charge on ABRI's title. But we would be getting either a disposal of this if the freehold's been transferred, or we'll be getting a consent dealing from the mortgage broker or mortgage lender rather, just to confirm that they're acceptable with the staircasing taking place. And then at that point, once everything's done and our list of jobs is all ticked off, we'll be ready for completion, and we'll just get that all scheduled in. So that is essentially it from us, and back over to you, Nick.
Thank you all, that's really helpful. So I can see there are lots of questions coming through thick and fast, so thank you all very much, and just please keep them coming. If anything's said during these conversations, just add those questions here and we'll be able to answer them for you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a start now and going through some of these questions, and I'll hand them out to the experts to be able to answer them for you. So I think the first one, which is quite a good question here, is what are the benefits of staircasing? I'm going to head that one over to Dan, if that's okay.
Yeah, really good question. So the ultimate goal of shared ownership is that you buy what you can when you can afford it. But the ultimate goal is to own that property outright, the 100%. So the benefits of staircasing really are the more that you can staircase, the more that you can own, the less you pay in rent to us. Ultimately, if you can own dropped out there and back. If you can own 100% of the property of all the times, and say the property is a house, Matthew will confirm this probably more than I can, but 9 times out of 10, the freehold will get transferred to you. In those instances, depending on where you live, there may be no service charges. It may be very minimal service charges if you live on an estate with, say, grounds maintenance, those kind of bits. So financially, that will benefit. But I think the ultimate goal, like I say, of shared ownership is buying what you can when you can afford to do it, and owning as much of that property until that is yours. Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. I think that was a good answer. Another question here is simply, do I have to staircase? Dan, I'm going to come back to you, I think, on this one.
Yeah, absolutely fine. You don't have to, no. You can stay as you are. Again, with shared ownership, if you own whatever share you own, if you want to sell at any point, you can do that. We have a resale service within Abry. Within your lease, there'll be a nomination period that we can sell the property. But if you're happy to stay there, happy to stay with what it is, absolutely fine. There's no requirement for you to do so. The only thing to keep in mind on with that is your lease, because you will have a shared ownership lease, and those years on that lease term will start ticking down. So like I say, there's a couple of things to think about there, but in the short term, no, there's no requirement to have to staircase, no.
Thank you, Dan. That's really helpful. So another question here is, do you have to use the mortgage broker that we've recommended? I think I'll answer that one quickly. Is no, you don't have to use them. You're free to use any mortgage broker that you wish. The reason we recommend our mortgage brokers are because of their experience and knowledge in shared ownership. They know what they're looking for in terms of the product and mortgage. So that's the only reason that we do recommend them. Going on to another question here is, if you want to staircase to 100%, does this go on market value of your home now or the original purchase price? Very good question. Matthew, could I put that over to you, please?
Yeah, of course. So the general process will be that the value of the property will be done through the RICS valuation. So we always require a valuation to be carried out before we begin acting on the actual transaction. This will be valid for normally about 3 months, but it will always say on the valuation how long it will be valid for. The value that we use for the staircasing, it will take into account the value of all the properties surrounding it. So it'll always be on the current market value and not on the original purchase price of the property, because this could have been obviously a long time ago, and obviously the value of property has risen massively over the last couple of years. So yeah.
Thank you, Matthew. Okay, so let's have another one here is, how much does the valuation cost? Really good question. Dan, can I stick that one over to you, please?
Yeah, good question. So, and this is a kind of a question we speak to a lot of our customers about. There is no set amount, unfortunately. It varies from surveyor to surveyor. The rough cost that we kind of work on from surveyors that we have just seen and heard from clients and customers is around £250 for evaluation. That can be more, it can be less. Each surveyor has their own terms and conditions, their own way of working. So what I always say to people, there is a website online which is RICS Firms, RICS Firms. It's the official RICS website, and what you can do, you can pop your postcode in to that website, and it will bring up a list of surveyors in your local area. Some will be local, some will be national surveyors that cover that patch. And I always recommend just getting a couple of free quotes, comparing the costs, comparing the services from those surveyors. Ultimately, it's going to be down to you which one you feel most comfortable with. But in a nutshell, it's a long kind of answer, but the rough kind of cost we estimate is £250, but we have no control over this. It is down to the surveyor. So always just get a couple of quotes, just see which one works with you and your budget, and go from there. So yeah.
Great, thank you, Dan. So another question here is, how will I know if the mortgage lender will lend me the funds to mortgage the remainder of my share? I think I'm going to put this one over to Elliot, if that's okay, just to talk about how they will know.
Yeah, it's a really, really good question, probably one of the most important ones. And it goes back to what I said sort of earlier on in my, my little opening speak, is before I would get anyone to start on the staircasing process, we would sort of check to see if it is affordable and see if we can get a lender to lend you the funds, because what we don't want to do, or I don't want to do, is you spend money and not be able to do this. So it's going back to the very beginning of getting all your ducks in order, which is checking the affordability and also getting things like, are all your documents in order? Have you got, you know, how's your credit history? So making sure that we do all the background checks before we take you forward and start costing money, just like Dan said a moment ago about paying the RICS survey and or incurring legal fees. Okay, back to Nick.
Thank you, Elliot. Excuse me. So another question here is it recommended to staircase to 80% first and then up to 100% if the stamp duty is a cost barrier? I think I might put this over maybe to a couple of you, and maybe Matthew, I might start first, just to talk a bit about the sort of stamp duty question there, if that's okay.
So the stamp duty on the property is very much something that everyone needs to be aware of. This will be something to actually discuss with your solicitors on this one. The stamp duty query that we often get on staircasings, this isn't really something that we deal with at all. So I'm not really able to give a very full answer on that, because I don't really want to give you the wrong information. And then obviously it'll all come back with, you know, it was said that this could happen, and, you know, all the rest.
Thank you, Matthew. That's perfect. Dan, I don't know if you wanted to add in anything about, you know, staircasing to 80% and, you know, onto 100%. Any thoughts or comments on that one?
Yeah, like I say, this is the kind of the beauty of shared ownership. It's you can kind of own in your own time, in your own affordability, what you can own. So it's really individual to each person. If going to 80% works for you rather than jumping straight up to 100, then absolutely that's what we would process for you and do from there. What I always say to people is try and staircase the maximum you can at one time, because obviously staircasing today will cost you X amount based on the market, but if that market then continues to rise, if you then want to staircase a bit more in a year's time or 2 years' time, it's going to cost you a bit more because the market has risen. So really it's down to your own kind of personal situations, and everybody is different. But I'd, you know, definitely recommend if you can do that, with the ultimate goal of owning the 100%. There's no requirement or kind of anything saying that, do you know what, it's probably better to wait until you can buy it all out in one rather than going to 80. Go to 80 and then go to 100 if that's what you're comfortable and affordable to do. So yeah.
Thank you, Dan. That's really helpful. So a couple more questions. Elliot, I've got two here that I'm going to whiz over to you. I might put them both together or might do it separately, so let me know how it's best to do. So can you use the equity in your house to buy the rest of your share?
That's a very, very good question, and the answer is yes. Yeah, the equity is your deposit, and also if you're lucky enough to have additional savings or get a gift from the bank of mum and dad or other relatives, you can also use that as well to increase your effective deposit amount and therefore reduce the amount of lending you may require for the additional share. Back to you, Nick.
Thank you. So there is another question about the mortgage here as well, is after it's accepted, would you essentially have two mortgages instead of a mortgage and rent? Elliot, are you able to answer that one?
Yeah, I think I understand the question. So basically, yeah, you would, if you're staircasing up to 100%, then usually the rental portion would drop off. And depending on whether it's a house or a flat, and again, Dan will probably answer this in a bit more detail later on, there may be ongoing charges once you own 100%, but you'd normally just have the one mortgage in this instance. Okay, sometimes dependent on the situation of the applicant, it may be a top-up mortgage, but it'd just be with the same lender. So it depends how you define it, but it will be in essence one mortgage with one lender in most cases. Okay, back to Nick.
Thank you, Elliot. So another question here, I'm just looking through them, is at which point would I receive the estimate for my new monthly costs? I'm assuming that could be like rent and charges. Also, is it possible to staircase 100% using a buy-to-let mortgage? So I think the first part of that question I'm going to put over to Dan is, at which point would I receive an estimate of my new monthly costs? From an ABRI perspective, and then Elliot, I'm going to come to you. If you could answer the bit about the buy-to-let mortgage, that'd be great.
Yeah, so again, this is all part of the process that we would progress for you from our side. So once we've got your valuation in, we've set up the file, we've got all the lease, everything's all saved. Like I said earlier, we will confirm in writing to you what it is going to cost to buy those shares that you've told us you want to buy. As part of this process, what we will do, we will contact our leasehold and our finance teams. Now, they will go through the lease, just check if there is going to be any ongoing charges and what those charges are going to be for. So a great example is, say you have a house and you want to go to 100%, but you may be on, say, a new build site, a big site that's been recently built. There could be communal areas within that site. There could be play parks, trees, shrubbery, those kind of bits that all need maintaining. Now, even though you own the 100%, there may be some obligation to pay a small service charge for the upkeep of those areas. So what our finance and leasehold teams would do would confirm that to us as soon as we get your application. Now, if we can confirm that to you straight away when we're sending you the letter confirming what it's going to cost you to buy those shares, we'll include that. If not, it will follow on in the coming days. So that kind of part of it would be confirmed to you very soon up front, before solicitors are instructed, those kind of things, just so you are kind of aware of whether there is going to be ongoing obligations in terms of a service charge, whether that's payable to us at ABRI or a management company directly, those kind of things. So we'll get that all confirmed at the start. But yeah, the buy-to-let thing, definitely think that's better for Elliot to answer that one.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Yeah, I normally, when I'm doing the staircasing, it's normally just as a residential mortgage, and then in the future, then it's obviously up to yourself, depending on any restrictions on the lease, whether it can be converted to a buy-to-let property at that stage. But normally, whenever I'm staircasing, it's always done as a residential mortgage. Back to Nick.
Great, thank you both. That's really helpful. Another question here is, are solicitors' fees to staircase similar to when initially buying, or is it usually less? Matthew, are you able to comment on fees for customers?
Yes, definitely. So the fees that you'll be incurring, obviously you'll have your own solicitor's fees. These will definitely be dependent on which solicitors you're using. So it's always vital that you actually get a couple of quotes from different solicitors just to, get an understanding of the ballpark of what the figures will be and what you're happy to be paying. Alongside that, we have a couple of charges that may be applicable and might actually have to be paid by yourselves. So these will be if there's kind of any additional restrictions on the property that require any sort of any consents or any proof that you've complied with different restrictions. This will all be able to be found on your leasehold title, but also they can be found within the lease. Each of these documents that we have to produce as an additional, they normally carry a charge of about £125, and then the VAT is charged on top of that. But if there is anything additional that we have to produce, these will also be set out to your solicitors at the beginning of the transaction, so they have plenty of time to make you aware of anything, and we can all get on the same page about how these are going to get paid and if everyone agrees they're actually required, and any other kind of queries that may come up about costs during the actual transaction. But yeah, that's it from us on fees.
Thank you, Matthew. Helpful. So another question here is, excuse me, if we decide not to staircase, can we carry on paying rent and even after paying off the mortgage? Dan, I think I'm going to put that one over to you initially, and then if we want to sell our share, we don't have, it says if we don't have many years on the lease, can we extend the lease and by how much? So Dan, can I pop that question to you?
Yeah, of course. So in terms of having no mortgage, so the longer you own the property, obviously the lease will tick down. Our leasehold team do deal with lease extensions, those kind of things, and they'd be able to advise you further on that. In terms, if you pay off your mortgage, you can continue as a shared owner. We have some shared owners who come into us without a mortgage. It's not a requirement of shared ownership to have a mortgage if your circumstances allow. But if you do pay off your mortgage and you are still a shared owner, you would still pay those rent and service charges as agreed on the share that you own. So yeah, hopefully that's nice and easy on that one.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, another question, I'm going to put this one over to Matthew, is the freehold always transferred for a house when staircasing to 100%? This is a good question.
Yes, so that's a very, very good question. And it was briefly mentioned by Dan earlier. And I think I'll say the same thing here, is that 9 out of 10 times the freehold will be transferred for a house on 100% staircasing. But it will purely be reliant on the clauses of the lease. So within the lease, there'll be a section called the staircasing schedule. And within this, it will set out everything. So it will tell you if on 100%, there'll be the freehold transferred. And if you're the 1 out of 10 occasions where it won't be transferred, it will have a list of the clauses that won't be included anymore. So these will usually be to do with like the rent, the authority to transfer the property to people, the use of the property, and a whole bunch of other things really. But again, it's more or less every time it will be transferred, but it just depends on what your actual individual lease says. So yeah, it will basically be a case-by-case basis. There's no blanket rule, but it's usually a yes, and that it will be transferred.
Excellent, thank you, Matthew. Another question here is, do you pay all the fees each time you staircase if you do it in small amounts? Dan, for you.
Yeah, this links in nicely to a point we kind of raised earlier, that This is why it's always best to try and staircase as much as you can in each go, because yes, every time you staircase there will be the fees associated. So you will have your valuation fees, your processing fees to ABRI, your solicitor costs, and any costs for your financial advisors. So each time you do it, those costs will be kind of accrued on each occasion. So if you are able to make a bigger jump in one go, you are kind of swallowing those costs in one go, rather than perhaps doing that in 2 or 3 smaller goes. So it all works in individual ways. Some people are in a position where they can do the larger jumps, some can do the smaller jumps. It's whatever works for you, whatever's best for your situation, because you could staircase a small amount now and then it could be a couple of years before you do it again. It's not something that you have to do every year or every other year. It's just whatever works for you. So yeah, again, a bit of a longer answer, but yeah, every time you do the process, those fees would be incurred. Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. I am going to just answer this one. It's can you buy all remaining shares in one go? I'm just going to simply say yes, you can. If you are able to, then yeah, absolutely, of course you can. I think it's been a theme is try and maximise what you can buy as soon as possible, really. So another question here is there a minimum deposit for staircasing? Elliot, I might put that one over to you if that's okay.
Hi Nick, yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, pretty much the standard amount would be a 5% of the staircasing amount you're looking to borrow at this stage. So there's the odd lender will do 100%, but the vast majority do need a 5% deposit, and obviously that'll give you better rates as well. Okay.
Thank you, Elliot. That's really helpful. So another question here is, what is the general cost of staircasing process, and can this price be included in the remortgaging at all? I might put this one over to Dan first, just to maybe give a bit of an overview of the staircasing costs. I know we've kind of mentioned it quite a lot recently, but just to give another clarification, that'd be great.
Yeah, so in terms of the costs, like we just said, there's really kind of the 4 main costs. So you're going to have your valuation cost for your RICS survey. Now that's, like we've said, a rough guide of 250. Could be more, could be slightly less. Our processing fee from ABRI's side is £180. Now we collect that on completion. We don't take that up front from you. That's all collected on completion via the solicitors. So those 2 costs there. You will also have your legal fees and any broker fees, any costs to the lender that they may have. Now, I'm not an expert on those, so it may be one to put to Elliot and Matthew just on those ones. I know Matthew's touched on fees earlier, so Elliot may have a bit more of a steer just on that kind of broker and lender charges, if there is any, for say a particular mortgage product or something like that.
Thank you, Dan. That's really helpful. Elliot, are you able to help with that further?
Yeah, hey Nick, Dan. Yeah, of course. With the fees wise, lenders are fairly happy for you to, if you want to add their lender fee onto the mortgage. Obviously, the danger of that is that it accrues interest over the term. Therefore, you end up paying a heck of a lot more than what you would have done if you'd have paid it up front. So, and also some of the lenders, if the fees take it over and above the loan to value boundary, it can also put you out of being able to do that actual product. So something we need to think about. But in essence, yes, with some lenders you can add the fee to the mortgage, but you will pay interest on it. So long answer, but there we go. Okay, back to you, Nick.
Thank you, Elliot. Thank you, Dan. So another question that's come in is just about kind of mortgage rate and interest rates really going on out in the market, especially for staircasing. Elliot, are you able to give us a bit of a, bit of an idea of how things are going?
Yeah, so rates. So question also I get asked a heck of a lot. Now obviously it's all to do with the crystal ball, and my crystal ball is very cloudy. At the moment, we're seeing that rates have started to come down a little bit, even though the base rate went up just before Christmas. And it's beginning of the financial year, so lots of lenders are fighting for financial share, but obviously they are still a fair bit higher than what they were back in early autumn. But at the moment we are seeing rates starting to trickle down a little bit, which is also good news for everybody concerned. Back to you, Nick.
Sounds positive. Thank you, Elliot. So another question here is, how long does the whole process for staircasing take from start to finish? Dan, I'm going to pop that one over to you first, if that's okay.
Yeah, again, it's one of those questions which we answer a lot, and we do hear a lot. And what I'd always say is it's really dependent on the solicitor, on your solicitor. And this is why it's always good to make sure that you have chosen a solicitor who is aware of shared ownership, knows the shared ownership product, those kind of things. Now, like I mentioned right at the start, your valuation report is valid for 3 months. So if you've decided you want a staircase, you send in your application form and your valuation report. We will usually turn that case around for you fairly quickly. Usually within 5 working days, you would have had contact from us, your file will be set up, and that process will be underway. Once you've confirmed that you want to proceed with the cost that we've said that the shares are going to be worth, the solicitors will then be instructed. Now, usually it happens within that 3-month time period that valuation is valid for. You get some transactions which absolutely fly through. There is no complications, anything like that. Sometimes you do get transactions where there may be some conveyancing issues. There may be stuff like that. So there's no kind of real answer. What we like to kind of say is, in the majority of cases, they are all done within that 3-month period that the valuation is valid for. It does go really, really quicker if you have a good solicitor who is aware of shared ownership. That is what I'd say is the real kind of key point. If you have a solicitor that isn't aware of shared ownership, it may take slightly longer, just where they are getting up to speed with the product, those kind of bits. So in the long and short, within 3 months, but it should be a lot quicker than 3 months.
Thank you, Dan. That's helpful. I've seen here as well as a couple of questions about the 1% staircasing that some of you may have heard of or may know more about. So I'll just sort of talk to you quickly about 1% staircasing. So this is part of the newer leases. So if you've recently moved into your shared ownership or bought one and you are on a particular lease that has this 1% staircasing element, it means that you can staircase for the next 15 years by 1% each year. To be able to do that, all you need to do is come back through to ABRI and the post sales team, and we will confirm to you what that 1% is worth, what that cost of that 1% is, and then we can talk to you about getting that done. That's a relatively quick process. There are no costs to you to staircase by 1% annually. You are only able to staircase by 1% if your lease allows you to do that. So that is not open to all our shared owners, I'm afraid. It is only those with that requirement in their lease. Okay, there's no fees associated to that for you either, and the amount of the 1% staircasing, how it's actually worked out, is not by a standard RICS valuation initially. It's actually worked on what the current value of your property was worth when you bought the property, and then how much that's increased by what we call by Land Registry. It's called a HPI index. So Land Registry will say to everybody, this is what your property has increased or even decreased in value over the period of time you've been living there, and that's how we work out what that 1% is. If you're not happy with that 1%, you are able to get a RICS valuation to determine the current market value of your property. But that's just a bit quick sort of chat about it. If you wanted to know any more about 1% staircasing, what I would say to you is please contact the post sales team at Abry. We can have a look at your lease, check you have that requirement, and then let you know more detail on that one. Okay, so hopefully that's answered those questions. There's lots of questions here. Thank you very much. There's lots going on. It's great. Just a couple of mortgagey things here as well as, can you advise whether additional borrowing can be requested with the current mortgage lender? If so, does the interest rate change? I'm going to go to Elliot first on that question, and then maybe Dan, just to talk a bit about maybe, you know, the remortgaging side from Abry as well.
Yeah, it is something you can. Hi Nick, sorry about that. Yeah, it is something we can look at and we can approach. And yes, the rates more than likely will be not only different, but be running at a separate term to your main mortgage. So you will actually have two mortgages running alongside each other on different rates and finishing at different times. So that's something you just need to manage and think about future rate changes. But yes, in essence, that's something you could look to do. Back to you, Nick.
Thank you, Elliot. Dan, did you just want to talk really quickly just about the remortgaging process? Because I appreciate that sometimes to be able to staircase, customers may need to remortgage, and there is a transaction associated with that with Abry as well. So I'll pop you over to Dan quickly just to go over that.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a really good point. We have a lot of customers who do remortgage, and perhaps some customers might not know that when you are remortgaging, there is an opportunity that you could buy further shares at that point, depending on how long you've been in the property, the equity, kind of all the things that we have spoken about up to this point. It could allow you to gradually buy those shares when you come to remortgage. It doesn't have to be coming into some money or cash buying the extra shares. It can be done at the same time as remortgaging. Now, the reason that I think you've asked me the question, Nick, is from Abry's side of things. When you do remortgage, whether that is with staircasing or outside of staircasing, if you're just doing a straightforward remortgage, as part of that process, the lender that you are going to, so if you are changing lenders when you remortgage, or sometimes even if you are staying with the same lender, your lender will require our approval as the housing association. So it will be kind of written into certain legal documents that we will need to approve that mortgage offer. So the reason we do that is to make sure that the mortgage offer itself has all the correct details, terms, those kind of things. So your mortgage offer may list your lease length remaining, for example, the share percent that you are buying, the name of the housing association itself. So we will check through that as part of the transaction and provide our approval to your lender to say that we have signed off your mortgage offer and are happy with it. So we will always look to see a copy of that just so that we can provide our approval. It goes hand in hand with staircasing, really, which is great. But like Nick said, although the staircasing transaction itself is one transaction, there may be a second transaction just kind of linking off of that with the remortgage as well. So yeah, really good question.
Right, thank you, Dan. Another question here is, can I use cash to staircase? Again, I think I might go back to Dan on that one in the first instance, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely fine. So cash is going to be absolutely fine to use to staircase. What will happen as part of that transaction, just a kind of compliance point of view, your legal advisor will probably just ask to see a copy of that bank statement for their internal compliance. But yeah, absolutely, there's no kind of rules against using cash. What you do find a lot of times is people may come into inheritance or come into some sort of funds from somewhere and use that as an opportunity to buy the remaining shares, further shares, those kind of things. all at one time. So yeah, no rules against that, absolutely fine to do so.
Thanks, Dan. So this question seems to have sort of cropped up a couple of times, I think, is people are really interested in getting an example of how much it would cost to staircase. So the question here is, would you mind possibly providing an example for staircasing, example 50% to 100%? How much would it cost to buy the share? I'm guessing you'll need a new mortgage potentially to cover that new amount. So I think this might be, you know, it's can we give an example, breaking it down? So maybe Dan, if I go to you first and say, from ABRI's perspective, what an example could be, and maybe follow that on what happens with that example at the mortgage stage, and then again, Matthew, maybe on to you from a legal perspective. Is that okay? So if we start off with Dan first.
Yeah, happy you came to me first on that, because I've got loads of info on this one. So what we always say, and I think Elliot's touched on it earlier, when you are thinking, so if you are at kind of point zero, you are thinking of staircasing, it's just kind of those early thoughts. What I'd always say is take a look at websites such as Rightmove, Zoopla, those kind of things. See if there are any similar properties to yours around your local area. You can put in your postcode in Rightmove, do a search of within quarter of a mile, half a mile, even a mile, see if there are any similar properties that kind of, they may not look like yours internally, but there are similar, you know, 3-bed semi, 3-bed detached, 2-bed flat, those kind of things, and get a rough idea of what those properties are being marketed at. It won't be exact, but that will give you a rough idea of hopefully what your property should be worth. Now, say you have a 50% share, and your flat, you can see around you that the other flats are valued at 200,000. You can do a rough kind of calculation in your head that 50% of 200,000 is 100,000. So to buy, if you wanted to buy that remaining 50% in one go, it's going to cost you 100,000 to buy that. Again, you can work the percentages all from there, those kind of things. But that's a real good starting point. If you want kind of an even further kind of value before you do pay for a RICS valuation, because kind of £250 odd just to find out the cost is a lot of money just to spend out if you're not sure you're going to proceed or not. So like Elliot said earlier, if kind of those websites aren't giving you a rough idea of what it's going to cost, you can then ask an estate agent if they would provide you with a rough cost. If you explain that you're looking to staircase, you just want a rough idea of what it's worth, they should hopefully be able to give you some comparables and provide you with that value so that you can do some calculations from home. What I'd always say, if you do have any questions with that, pop us a line, pop us a call, an email. We can always just see if there's anything we can do. Of course, we can't confirm the value of your property, and we can't confirm any values until we've got a RICS valuation, but we can have these conversations and see if we can help break this down a bit for you, just so that that start of the process isn't so daunting or overwhelming, anything like that. It gives you a bit more control, a bit more understanding of what you should be hoping to kind of see figure wise when it comes through. But yeah, more than happy to pass that through to back to you, Nick, and then on to Elliot.
Thank you, Dan. Yes, Elliot, is there anything further you'd like to add?
I think that's a really detailed answer from Dan. So all I'd say is that, yeah, so with that example, it's the 100,000 lending on top of whatever lending you've got at the moment. And also one of the things is we're looking at ABRI to see what the, particularly in a flat, what the ongoing cost would be once you've staircased to 100%. You'll already know what you're paying on your current mortgage, and we would give you a fairly rough idea of what the potential additional top-ups would be. And therefore you would know, especially when I staircase, my clients will know fairly accurately before they start the process with the RICS survey what the costs are going to be. But obviously rates do change. So obviously what we're talking about literally right now, today, right now, most likely could be different on Monday. So it's just a rough guide that we can give you at that stage. Okay, back to you, Nick.
Thank you both, that's really helpful. Matthew, I'm not sure if I think that everyone's covered everything, but is there anything further you'd like to add at all?
Yeah, so like you say, everyone's really done a very, very good job there of covering all the information. The only additional cost really that we would say from our side would be if it's not a directly straightforward transaction, and that any additional documents or forms are required to go alongside just the memorandum and any transfer documents that we need to create. These again would set all of this out to your solicitors, and that's essentially it really. It's a very simple process from our side. It's just making sure that everything that's already been agreed between yourself and ABRI for the 100% share in this instance is all set out in the correct order so that Land Registry will accept it, and it just won't cause any more headaches in the future. But no, there's not really anything additional from our side on this example.
Thank you all. So I think I'm going to stop here now with the questions. I just want to say thank you all for participating and delivering these questions. I think it's been really, really useful, and I hope that you all have also found this time useful. If we've not had a chance to answer your question, what we will do is we will reply and send some FAQs out to you. Also, everybody that got the email about our webinar today will also receive a link to today's event as well. So if there's anything you think you might have missed from the conversations, you'll be able to re-watch that through the recording today. Okay. Firstly, if I just want to say thank you to our panel of experts as well. Your time today has been very, very helpful and valid. So thank you all very much. Thank you. Like I said, the questions will be online and we'll answer the FAQs. If you have any questions about staircasing or need a bit of information, I'd point you firstly to the ABRI Homes website where you'll find comprehensive information, but also pick up the phone and contact us and speak to the post-sales team who will be able to deliver your post-sales and staircasing transactions. Okay.